Hello, my name is Gerald Sanders, and I am President and CEO of ONUS Inc., a 501c4 organization that is committed to resolving long-standing problems that seem too big to fix. Our current focus at ONUS is on developing an effective solution to help end police brutality in the United States. And towards that end, we have drafted a legislative proposal known as the Uniform Reporting Law Enforcement Improvement Act, or URLEIA. Now, we begin this process by exercising due diligence. We began with extensive research. We studied use of force killings to understand how law enforcement agents are being allowed to kill without justification and then escape responsibility for their actions. We also talked to constitutional experts. Our goal was to understand the scope of law enforcement powers, legally speaking. We also talked to law enforcement agents in order to ascertain and understand the types of obstacles they confront on a daily basis. We also sought to obtain their ideas on how policing could be improved. We also talked to individuals and people who were in the investigative chain, the crime scene investigators, medical examiners, etc., to find out how law enforcement agents' control of that process, how it is contributing to the inability to hold law enforcement agents accountable. We also examined law enforcement training protocols. Our goal was to understand how does training presented in the classroom translate into behavior out in the field. We reviewed state laws and found out that many use of force statutes, state use of force statutes, are in fact unconstitutional and do not arise to the standards set forth by the U.S. Supreme Court. We listened to everyone, victims' families, experts. Our goal was to develop a comprehensive, well-rounded understanding of policing as it currently exists in the United States. We also looked at DOJ's role and found that the U.S. Department of Justice is in fact the principal law enforcement oversight body in the United States. DOJ has at its disposal a tool that is called the Pattern or Practice Investigation. The Pattern or Practice Investigation was conferred upon the right to use that investigative protocol was conferred upon DOJ by an act of Congress that created the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Improvement Act, which was enacted in 1994. A pattern or practice investigation involves DOJ sending into a police department or into a community a contingent of experts, statisticians, and investigators to determine if the policing practices being carried out by a policing agency evidence a pattern of unconstitutional practices. DOJ's contingent of investigators, when they're conducting a pattern or practice investigation, comb through the files of a law enforcement agency, including the incident reports and the use of force files. They talk to the members of the agency from the law of the officers who patrol the streets to supervisors and chiefs. They also host community meetings and invite community members in to talk about their interactions with law enforcement agents. They talk to experts and oversight bodies that oversee the activities of that particular agency. And again, the entire effort, which takes months and is often done years after a law enforcement agency has begun to evidence illegal or unconstitutional practices. They gather all of that information and analyze it and then conclude whether or not that agency is in fact engaging in unconstitutional practices that deny the community members of their constitutional rights. Now, once we conducted this extensive investigation, what we sought to do was to identify the problems that currently account for dysfunctional policing in the United States. And once we identified the problems, then we formulated solutions to resolve those problems, solutions that would improve the culture of policing in the United States at the most fundamental level. We encased those solutions in the legislative proposal we have titled the Uniform Reporting Law Enforcement Improvement Act, or URLEIA. Now, I want to stress that it is a legislative proposal and it is not legislation. In fact, we are currently working very hard to find a congressional sponsor, a member of Congress who will sponsor this legislation so it can begin the process needed to that is prerequisite to having it enacted into law. Now, once enacted, the Uniform Reporting Law Enforcement Improvement Act will govern local, state, and federal agents and agencies, as well as private duty security entities and their officers. Now, law enforcement agencies, I might add, includes penal institutions and juvenile institutions, and any institution involved in a law enforcement activity, any law enforcement activities. The URLEIA proposal has primarily two components. There's one component, a series of solutions that are designed to address concerns about transparency, and then there's another component designed that contains a series of solutions that are designed to address the issue of accountability. Now, perhaps in the transparency section, the major tenet is the creation of a new national data bank that must be used by every law enforcement agency and every private duty security firm in the United States to document interactions with the public. It is called the Pattern or Practice Data Bank, or POP for short. Now, URLEIA requires that every law enforcement agent and every private duty security officer in the nation be active in this data bank in order to perform security or policing functions. POP also will track the individual actions of every law enforcement agent and security officer in the nation, because it requires that every action and interaction with a member of the public be documented by that officer in POP. POP also requires that the officer provides the race, the gender, and the age of every person who is the subject of a law enforcement action. Now, because this data is entered into POP, it is the only data bank in the United States that captures at the officer level the activities of a particular officer, or thus might I say the patterns or practices. Now, this data is enhanced by the fact that members of the public can log on into the POP data bank from their home computer and comment on an incident report that involves the person, or file a complaint against the officer. So the same kinds of activities that the U.S. Department of Justice conducts when it is carrying out a pattern or practice investigation, the POP data bank is accumulating on a day-to-day basis. And the beauty of POP is that because this data becomes immediately available via a series of reports that POP will generate, law enforcement agents who are engaging in concerning patterns and practices will be immediately identifiable on these reports generated by POP, because POP will identify these officers who do in fact exhibit troubling patterns and practices, thereby allowing them to be quickly monitored and removed from the force. So unlike the pattern or practice investigation, which is often years, often there are years, I should say, where law enforcement agents have been acting in dysfunctional ways and in denying citizens of their constitutional rights and treating them unfairly, acquiring and taking assets and wrongfully incarcerating people. The POP data bank actually will prevent that because it will allow for the early detection of officers who exhibit troubling patterns. Now, URLEIA also, as part of the transparency component, will allow or automatically deputizes licensed attorneys to act as agents of DOJ. DOJ, in the 5 years prior to the shooting of Michael Brown, conducted 20 pattern or practice investigations. There are, however, more than 18,000 local and state law enforcement agencies in the United States. So for 5 years prior to Michael Brown, DOJ conducted 4 pattern or practice investigations, yet there were 18,000 agencies. And what that tells us is that DOJ simply does not have the manpower to police law enforcement. What this provision, the deputization of licensed attorneys, what it does is it expands DOJ's workforce exponentially by allowing local attorneys to review POP reports, identify the emergence of troubling patterns on the behalf of an agency, a law enforcement agency, or officers, and then be empowered to take actions against the agency or the officers using powers conferred upon that attorney by DOJ. Now, with respect to the accountability component of URLEIA, it introduces a new standard in policing, completely elevates the standard by introducing an obligation to preserve life and prevent injury during policing. So law enforcement agents will be evaluated based upon the degree to which they can arrest people without beating them up. They can use de-escalation practices to garner compliance, and they can use all kinds of strategies to avoid using force. So the goal now, rather than justifying use of force by saying, oh, I feared for my life, the new standard is you will have to explain what you did to avoid using force. And it needs to be in compliance with the standards that, of course, will be set in new training protocols. The URLEIA also now hands over the entire investigative process to an independent investigative team. No longer will CSIs, who are themselves law enforcement agents in the county medical examiner and the prosecutor, no longer will they be involved in investigating use of force incidents or involving law enforcement agents. That entire process will now be done by an independent team selected by the victim's family. And all of the independent teams that are certified by the state to act in that capacity will be listed on the state website, such that the victim's family will have the opportunity to select which team conducts the investigation. It also, URLEIA does, empowers the independent investigative team, not the prosecutor, to present the facts that it accumulated from its investigation of a use of force event to a newly seated grand jury. So we've completely moved the public prosecutor out of the matter. And if the independent investigative team and the grand jury determine that there should be an indictment of the officer for violating a victim's constitutional rights, then the family will be permitted to select a lawyer who can then act as a private prosecutor on behalf of the family, prosecuting the officer for the illegal activity he or she is alleged to have committed upon the victim. A major component also of URLEIA is the introduction of a new office called the Office of Civilian Oversight and Accountability. This would be an office managed by the Department of Justice in conjunction with and it will serve as to work to enlist the public and maintain the involvement of the public in helping to determine policing protocols, policing policies, etc. throughout the United States. So this office will be continuously holding conferences and all kinds of sharing information, acquiring information, and interacting with the public in order to allow the public to have a very prominent role in the development of policing policies in the United States. Now, you have a role to play in this process. In the process I'm referring to is ensuring that the Uniform Reporting Law Enforcement Improvement Act becomes law. The Fraternal Order of Police and the police lobbyists are amongst the most powerful unions in the country. And in fact, many of the congressional leaders that we have already approached are reluctant to get involved because they do not want to incur the wrath of the law enforcement lobbyists or their fraternal orders. So your voice and your power that you display must be far superior to that law enforcement agents and fraternal order of police officers are displaying if, in fact, we are to succeed in our determination to make URLEIA law. So the first thing we need you to do is to go to our website, which is at www.changeisonus.org. Click on the Home tab and you will see Get Connected, Stay Connected. Please provide your information. With that information, we can maintain contact with you and let you know about actions we want you to take as a national community in order to pressure congressional leaders to make sure URLEIA becomes law and is not stripped when it is enacted. We also ask that you contact presidential candidates and express your support for URLEIA. Ask them if they support URLEIA. If they say yes, also ask them if there are specific provisions they do not support, and ask them to provide that information in writing and to list any provisions they do not support. We ask that you do the same thing with your congressional leaders. Contact your senators, which every person has 2 senators and 1 House member. Contact your 3 representatives and ask them to support URLEIA. Ask them to tell you what their stance is. If they support URLEIA, ask them to provide that in writing. And if they provide in writing that they support URLEIA, be sure to ask them to provide in writing the indication of any provisions that they do not support, if in fact there are provisions they do not support. We also ask that you purchase the URLEIA postcards and hand them out. You can purchase 1,000 postcards for $35. $35. You can't even buy a pair of shoes hardly for $35. So please purchase the cards. Walk into your communities, take them to your neighbors, canvass your neighborhood, and share those cards and ask people to listen to this presentation and to go to our website and sign up. We literally need a national army of people insisting that congressional leaders pass URLEIA without cutting important provisions or watering it down. Donate. Any amount is appreciated. When you think about the amount to give, to donate, all we ask is that you think about this: the value of young lives that will be saved, The peace of knowing that an imperfect child, including your child, your grandson, your nephew, an imperfect child of color can actually leave home, encounter a law enforcement agent, and return home safely. And then also think about the value of the improved mental health for those individuals of color who now suffer from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because of the police terrorism that is so rampant in our society today. We also ask that you purchase a Changes on Us t-shirt. Think about the impact of seeing millions of people in the Changes on Us t-shirt, whereby people will know that you support URLEIA. And again, all of the t-shirts, the postcards, all of that can be purchased on the www.Changes on Us website by selecting the Fund URLEIA button. And of course, don't forget to volunteer. Devote time. This is an effort that will require time and money. We also need you to help by helping us to secure endorsements. If you know public personalities and those persons have a stage that they can talk about URLEIA from, please ask them to listen to this presentation and to come aboard and join us in our national effort to make URLEIA law. We also ask that any organizations you are affiliated with, tell them about URLEIA. Ask them to endorse the legislation, and we will publish their names, the organization's name, on our website. Any party interested in endorsing URLEIA can send an email saying, "We endorse URLEIA," under signature of the executive director or president of that organization, to endorsements@changeisonus.org. In the end, you and I will determine if URLEIA becomes law. The amount we donate, the time we invest, and the energy we expend is what makes us change agents. So I encourage you to be the change. Help make URLEIA law. Remember, change is on us.
Are you coming to the streets? They shot up a man, surrendered on his knees. Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we close our doors, pretend we do not see. Are you coming to the streets where dead men call out, it's justice that we need? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we close our doors, pretend we do not see. Are you coming to the streets to lift up your voice so that we can be free? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we close our hearts, pretend we do not see. Are you coming to the streets, an agent of change, locked hand in hand with me? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we close our eyes, pretend we do not see. Are you coming to the streets? They shot up a man, surrendered on his knees. Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be If we close our doors, pretend we do not see.